Bay Buccaneers are up 31-0 heading into the fourth quarter against the Eagles. Come on.
Hello, welcome to Hat Trick. I am Jordan Dyler-Coltman, joined by Elliot Tanti and Braden Dyler-Coltman. I have no witty quotes or interesting facts about this week, other than that there's lots to talk about. I know Elliot is raring to go. He's got his hat in hand for our first topic, and a busy weekend in the NFL we're going to get to, and obviously a very, very tumultuous time in oil country. Those are our topics this week. I don't see any reason to waste any time on the preamble. Do you guys?
No.
Okay, then let's do it. Here it is. This is topic one. Okay, as I mentioned a moment ago, we are going to pick up right where Elliot took his hat off last week. Novak Djokovic has officially been dismissed from the continent of Australia, the country of Australia. The resolution to what was a court battle that has dragged on now for a couple weeks came this weekend. Elliot took his hat off to him last week, I think a little bit sort of tongue in cheek, because the whole thing really had devolved into just a really messy and really kind of almost comical sort of fight over COVID protocol and over visa applications and whatnot. Obviously, for those who don't know, Novak Djokovic, the world number one ranked tennis player, arrived in Australia about 2 weeks ago to prepare for and begin the Australian Open, which is the first of the Grand Slams in the tennis schedule. And upon arriving in Australia, he discovered his visa was being revoked. He had previously sought an exemption both from the Australian Open, like the sporting committee, the organizers of the tournament, an exemption for the fact that he's not vaccinated from COVID-19. And he also got permission from Queensland, which is the province where this tournament takes place, to come into that area without having been vaccinated, even though that was against the national rules. However, when he landed, it was discovered that the government of Australia was going to bar him from entering the country again because of his lack of vaccination. They have a very strict policy concerning foreigners entering the country and their vaccination status. He challenged that in court, won his first court battle, suggesting that he wasn't in violation, or he should have been given more of an opportunity. So he went on to practice and prepare, and then the government, actually the foreign minister, ended up revoking his visa a second time, and this time more permanently. He challenged that one more time in court, lost his court battle, and found himself on a plane and not playing Monday in Australia to start the tournament. He is the reigning champion of the Australian Open, and he also now potentially will find himself facing a 3-year ban on returning to Australia if this visa dismissal ends up being upheld. I'm sure there'll be some court challenges and whatnot moving forward. Long story short, Australian PM Scott Morrison believes very strongly in strong borders. He's obviously a very right-wing leaning politician, and I think he made a bit of a show of this entire thing. But obviously Novak Djokovic made no sort of saint of himself either. He lied on his visa application about having not traveled to other countries. And I think overall, no one comes out of this looking good. But in the end, a resolution was found. Elliot, I'm going to go to you first, because I know you took your hat off to Novak last week. Do you stand by that, or have your opinions on this matter changed?
Well, I stand by my hats off last week. I thought he was being put through what was a cluster mess, and we've seen that's borne out to be the truth. He's in this entire situation, he was promised things that ultimately not only the Australian government but his professional association couldn't deliver on, and I think that that's the problem here. There's lots of talk about the government of Australia, the government of Queensland, Novak Djokovic himself, who I don't agree with. He should be vaccinated. Don't signal my hats off to him as some sort of endorsement for anti-vax sentiment. But what I am struggling with here is how the professional tennis association of tennis professionals is allowing anyone at all to participate in a tournament or any event whatsoever, regardless of whether it's a major tournament or not, regardless of their standing in the world with regards to their skill and their talent, why they're allowing anyone to play the game without being vaccinated. And what frustrates me in this conversation is that there's tons of talk about the Australian government's response, the response of Queensland and Novak Djokovic, but no one's talking about the league itself. Every other league has made a decision. If you are unvaccinated, you should not be playing. Not every other league, but that's been a position that many leagues have taken.
What league? And, name one.
The NHL.
Nope, there's no rule there. Yeah, but that was still player choice. It was still player choice. The only deterrent there was the border problem. That's the only deterrent.
Yes.
And the NHL didn't make that problem.
Lots of strongly encouraged stuff. Yes. Okay. Absolutely. There's no rules necessarily.
But and the NBA right now is allowing or considering allowing players who are unvaccinated to play in places like Brooklyn, for example, Kyrie Irving, but by paying a fine. They'll pay a fee for him to be able to play in that arena.
But that's not also on the NBA. That's the government of New York is the one who's barring him from playing there.
Exactly.
Not the league. Not the league.
But getting back to my point, and regardless of what other leagues are doing, he shouldn't have been allowed to play. If it's simply stated, this individual is not anyone who's not vaccinated should not be participating in this tournament. There's no plane ticket bought.
Sure.
There's no arrival to Australia. And there's no court case appeals process and his ultimate dismissal from the country.
See, okay.
And I think so there's a leader what I'm struggling with here is all the talk about rules and innuendo and things like that. And no one seems to be talking about the fact that if all things were equal and he had won his appeal, he would be participating in a tournament to get today unvaccinated. Right. And I think that for me continues to be a problem. That's not on the player. That's not on the government. That's on the professional association.
True. And we should definitely be holding these leagues and organizations to a higher standard when it comes to player safety. I completely agree with you. I think the truth is that none of them are going to do it for one very simple reason. It comes down to one word. It's called money. The amount of money that these organizations could lose from losing these players and their connected sponsors and all of those things is too high a risk for them to worry about these things. We've seen this so many times before. When has the NFL ever given a shit about player safety when it comes to the opportunity to make money off the backs? When has the NHL ever worried about really going after concussions or really going after dangerous hits? These things always are a factor. And now you've got a whole different thing to contend with, this outside virus that is completely separate from the actual gameplay and the dangerousness of the gameplay. I mean, there's not a lot in tennis that would be considered dangerous to players' health and safety. It's a non-contact sport, but this is a whole different thing. And I do agree with you that we should hold that league to its standard. But in lieu of that, I think that, we need to be asking ourselves, why is anyone why is anyone surprised that this was the outcome? Braden, I'm going to let you jump in because we kind of went out of there.
Just consequences like this is, they have stated that this is the consequence of not being vaccinated. This player knows this, and it doesn't matter that he's number one in the world. That's all beside the point here. Like, there's a lot of other stories going on in the Australian Open right now that I think are a lot more important, like Osaka's return and there's so many other exciting things here. And I think I'm sure ATP loves the swarm of media on the sport, but not on this. Like it doesn't feel great. And it's funny because the thing I read there, it was the reason that they were pushing for this is that the government of Australia was concerned that his unvaccinated status would actually cause civil unrest. Like, that's huge. And is like the fact that that's what they're pinning this on, or that's what it doesn't seem truthful. It doesn't seem real. It doesn't.
Yeah. I would agree that, as I said in the intro, I think both sides of this have a lot of questions to answer, right? I think Novak Djokovic did not endure himself to anyone in how he handled this situation. That's where I will start. He's the big name attached to this. Obviously lied on the application, obviously has had a track record of being pretty vocal and pretty open about his dislike of COVID protocol. And, he is an anti-vaxxer. He's been pretty clear about that. People may not remember June of 2020, when we were right in the first wave of this whole pandemic, he held a tennis tournament privately to make money, had kids come, and it basically became a super spreader event. That's the first of apparently almost three times he's had COVID. We're not quite sure how many times he's had it. Yeah, he had it a month or two ago, which is the reason he gave for his exemption from needing a vaccine. answer me that one. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Lied about not having been in multiple countries. So like he's no innocent figure in this. I think the notion that he's been mistreated is kind of, I mean, I'm sorry. There are people dying in ICUs right now. This is the number one ranked tennis player in the world who is living, in a very luxurious lifestyle. He flew in and out of Australia in a private jet. This guy is not suffering here. Sure, it probably was inconvenient for him to not be in the Four Seasons and instead to be in an immigration hotel for 4 days. I'm sure that was really, really hard on him. But I would offer him this. If you really want to make a point of trying to explain to Novak Djokovic what his actions say to other people as a role model, maybe instead of kicking him out of Australia, why don't you take him down to one of your ICUs, or why don't you take him down to one of your ERs and let him see all of the hundreds and hundreds of first responders who have been suffering for 2 years nonstop as people are dying around them from this very serious and very real disease. That's what I would say.
Well, he's
I'll
unvaccinated,
go to one.
so he's at risk then.
Fine, but that's his choice. Isn't that the whole point of this? That's his choice. Most of the people in those ICUs are also unvaccinated. The vast majority of them who are now suffering from serious parts of COVID. I will point out one more thing. I did say there are two sides to this. I do believe there are two sides to this. I do think that Australia completely mishandled how this process was dealt with. I think that they've made a much bigger spectacle out of this than was necessary, which doesn't lead them also to look very good coming out of it, right? Obviously, as I said, Scott Morrison is, he's no hero in this whole thing too. As the Prime Minister of Australia, he's a pretty far right wing guy, and he's had a pretty unpleasant track record if you look back to immigration. I think that there's a lot of politics at play here as far as the point he's trying to make, which is that he's using this as a way to sort of bolster his anti-immigration and anti-foreign sort of policy here. We're tough on the borders. We've got a whole bunch. And if you look, actually, it's fascinating. They have one of the largest visa rejection and detention records under him that Australia's ever had. A lot of people are being stopped at the borders from a lot of different parts of the world. But what does confuse me, and maybe Elliot, I know this isn't a politics podcast, but I do have a question for you politically. If you're a far hard right wing leaning guy, why would you pick a fight with an anti-vaxxer at this time politically? Like, I'm assuming in Australia, a lot of the people who are anti-vax are probably still lining up on the right-hand side. It feels a little bit like he's kind of going after his base with this one. This feels like scoring political points on one side, showing you're a hardliner on immigration, and at the same time, kind of, am I wrong on this? Like, this feels very strange politically.
I think on the surface, you're probably right. And I'd be hesitant to comment too much on this because I'm not as versed in Australian politics as I used to be. However, I think the initial backlash at the approval of Djokovic's visa was such a political burden to bear that outsized any sort of concern around upsetting his base for going after an anti-vaxxer. I think Australia's been pretty strict through multiple administrations now with regards to their response to COVID, and that's what the expectation has been. And island nations have the luxury of being a lot more strict and it being really impactful in terms of case numbers. I look at a couple other, Iceland's another example. Shout out to Malta, same thing. Like, if you're an island nation and people can't just drive over a border to come and see you, it's a lot easier to control these types of things. And I think, well, Australia is a massive island. It is still an island. And so if you're able to contain who's coming in and out, Australians have gotten used to that. And so the notion that some guy, because he's ranked number one, can just come in, even though he's unvaxxed, and be celebrated in the tennis community and all that stuff caused so much upheaval and anger amongst mainstream Australians. The majority of people in all countries are vaccinated. For the first world countries anyway, are vaccinated and are reasonable people, and so that's very upsetting. So it maybe speaks to the political turmoil that the initial exemption had caused for him, that he was willing to go this far.
So I want to wrap it up here, but Braden, let me ask you one more question here, and let's go back to the sports side of this. When you think about Novak Djokovic, he's of the same generation as Rafa Nadal. He's the same generation as Roger Federer. There's definitely a conversation. These three guys have dominated, the last decade of tennis. Many would argue Novak Djokovic is emerged as the best of the three of them. Certainly at the end, he caught Roger Federer just sort of at the end of his sort of peak. However, there's an argument to be made that this guy is one of the greatest tennis players of all time. I wonder what this does legacy wise as an athlete to him playing here. Had he played it even on Australia, what was going to be the response? Are people going to be booing him? Like, he may never play in Australia again. I don't know how long his career is going to go.
That's what I was wondering.
But he may be on a 3-year ban here. It's possible he never plays Australia again. That's the tournament he's dominated. He's got a chance. Had he won, if he wins one more, he will have won the most Australian Opens of all time for a male player. What does this do to his legacy? The fact that not only has this whole scenario unfolded this way, but potentially, just the tarnishing of his image too. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I do think it's going to affect him going down the road. I don't know what suspension would look like, and I don't know what other tournaments is he going to run into an issue like this with. Other countries probably have a lot less strict rules, but who's to say that doesn't change down the road as well? And with Djokovic already having a scenario like this following him, I don't think this ends well. I don't think that this is something that can just kind of leave him. I don't think people are going to forget about this.
Well, Elliot, we know you are our Novak Djokovic fan on this show. What's his legacy coming out of all this?
I mean, if he never wins again, he still won the tournament 9 times. So that's his legacy right there. I mean, I have a hard time believing that people's stances on COVID is going to impact their legacies in any sport, and tennis would be any different. I know that's frustrating to say. And my flippant nature on this topic for the last 2 weeks speaks to how fed up I am on a bunch of different fronts with professional athletes in the way that they've dealt with this crisis. But unfortunately, that's driven by things like, frankly, it's not going to impact their legacy.
I guess the only way to know will be to bring this back up when we get further down the road. And as Braden said, this whole thing's very fluid. Elliot's suggesting that the Tennis Association should be the first ones to maybe implement rule. It's very possible that things change now moving forward, because they're going to find themselves having to think more about how they handle this themselves. And I think the other thing is, legacy-wise, regardless of legacy, I think his image amongst other players has changed too. He was a sideshow for the whole beginning of this tournament. You could listen to the frustration. I know I heard Rafa Nadal and also Andy Murray, both pretty frustrated that all the questions they were getting were about Novak's visa application as opposed to worrying about tennis, which is, obviously very important. And Andy Murray had a pretty passionate defense of vaccinations, and talking about he's got family members who work in hospitals and whatnot. So, all right, I guess we will leave it there. And that's topic 1. Hey, if you're a fan of Hat Trick Sports, then I promise you are going to love the Backyard Basketball Podcast. Hat Trick's very own Braden Dollar Coltman sits down every Wednesday with his best bud, Christian Steck. And together, they break down all the news, rumors, transactions from around the basketball world. Whether it's the NBA or college hoops, these two guys love talking basketball, and you are going to love listening every Wednesday on the Backyard Basketball Podcast. Okay. Let's go to topic 2 here. And I know this is one that nobody really wants to deal with. I think we're all burying our heads in the sand and hoping that things just get better when we pull them back out, but it just doesn't feel like that's the case. I know I've had conversations with both of these two gentlemen, independent of each other at different points throughout what has been a very difficult month and a half now, as Edmonton Oilers fans. The Edmonton Oilers have lost 13 games. They've only won 2 since December 1st. They were off to a really positive start to the season. They built up a very solid stack of wins that has bolstered them in the standings a little bit through what has become a pretty epic tailspin here. They find themselves currently sitting at a 17-11-6 record. They have tumbled down the standings after being first in the league at the beginning of December. And obviously, it's become pretty apparent it's broken. Something's not working here. Every person on Twitter, every fan, every pundit, and every media member has got a different theory or variation on a theory here. We've heard now from the general manager over the last week, Ken Holland, coming out and saying he had no intention to fire Dave Tippett. He believes the answer is in the room. Obviously, we're starting to see the desperation and the cracks in the foundation of this organization as they look towards every solution possible, one of which appears to be the much, I don't even know where to start with this one. Evander Kane appears to be the only option when it comes to a solution here, and all the baggage he drags with him. We had a really good conversation a week ago about compartmentalizing bad behavior off the field when we think about players' performances on the field, and obviously Evander Kane fits perfectly into that category. I don't even know where to start with this other than, is this rock bottom? Like, can it get worse than this, Elliot? And if it does, like, how do the Oilers fix this?
Is this okay? So I'll tackle, there's two questions there. So I'll tackle the first one. Is this rock bottom? It may very well be. But you don't hit rock bottom until you're still getting better. And they lost to the 30th place team last night.
So that's what I mean. How can it get worse?
So it's if they keep losing.
Well, they're playing the top ranked team next.
Yeah, I mean, so if they keep losing, then it can continue to bottom out here. So I don't know. I don't know that. I don't think that I don't know that this is rock bottom, and that is a problem. That is the problem in of itself, right? Is that we just don't know when is this going to end. We expected after the 3-game losing streak, it turned into a 5-game losing streak. Then they got 2 back, or then it became 9 or 10, and then they got 2 games back, and then they fell into a funk again. And, since Dave Tippett got COVID, he's not won a game as a coach, which is crazy because he wasn't the coach on the bench when they won those 2 games.
He hasn't won a game since December 1st.
Yeah. Since basically
the 2 wins they had in that time span, he was not on the bench.
He was not on the bench for them. Yeah. So it was actually before COVID, he went on that side. That's right. So all of the things point to it's really bad. I'm not going to argue with that, but is this the bottom? I don't know. How do you fix this? Well, there's not a lot of options here. And this has been the struggle, is that the team's been right up against the cap because of poor decisions in previous administrations, and maybe now poor decisions in current administrations. And now you're looking at a team that is built to score and can't score. Did nothing to deal with a precarious goaltending situation over the year. And maybe for good reason. They'd had pretty decent success last year, but now that decision's come into question. And ultimately the problem here, which is that they've gutted their defensive depth, which was the issue in the offseason that I took with the direction of the team. And so when they ran into injuries and challenges, they had nothing to call up but rookie players. And you're starting to see what happens when you've got more than one rookie on an NHL team. You cannot win games consistently. There should be one rookie on this team. It should be Evan Bouchard, and he should be playing maybe 14 minutes a night. Since this losing skid and the issues in defense from injuries and COVID, this team's bottomed out. And you have to point to the fact that people like Caleb Jones and Ethan Bear, who were young in their career, early in their careers, but had legitimate NHL experience, are not there to fill the gaps. And instead, it's folks like Willie Legazin and other, rookie players that just do not have the game experience to get you through an 82 games schedule, or even, a 15-game stint at an NHL caliber level. And that, with poor goaltending, has led to a team that's bottomed out. That's where the issues are. Can they get a new goalie? Make some sort of change there? Maybe. I don't know. Is Evander Kane a great player that could help this team? Probably, even with all the other bullshit that surrounds him. But again, that doesn't solve goaltending, and it doesn't solve defensive depth. And that seems to be, to me, from what I'm watching, the issue right now.
Braden?
Well, there's one thing to solve this precarious goaltending situation, and I'm all for getting another goalie, but it's got to be stay in your freaking net. I don't know how many times our goaltenders have so many terrible turnovers from the goaltender. It doesn't make any sense. And I'm really sick of it. Like, first I was really sick of Koskinen just letting in the first goal over and over and over again and constantly having to catch up for the entire game. But now we're just seeing boneheaded, the play that happened with Skinner, there's no reason to be out of your net for that. There's zero reason. Let your defense get into the hard corner there, break the cycle up and get it out. With with the Ottawa game, there were a lot of positives. Like there, now in the first and the second period, third period, that's where they got to sort their shit out. We cannot let 5 goals in one period. What was nice, we were starting to see scoring on depth. We were seeing Perlini put in points. We were seeing Darnell Nurse score. Like that's the kind of help and support we need. But I mean, just as everybody else, as an Oilers fan, I have every idea of how to change this team. And, you know, there's no asset. There's nothing to move. And like you're saying, Elliot, the cap space is just like incredibly choked, that even with the idea of a Kane or any trade, there would have to be so much more movement that goes along with it. I don't know, you guys. I do think that Holland has to pull the trigger on something. I don't like the idea that nothing's on the table, and if you're trying to win now, that you're not willing to move, you know, anything. There's some serious money that's being held up in Cass, in Koskinen, even in Barrie, that is like, it's troubling there. I don't know what the right move is. I like the idea of adding somebody who can score at the clip that Evander Kane does, but just as everybody else agrees, like the bad outweighs, and it's I don't know how that works. I don't know how that fits. I also don't like seeing McDavid just say, well, it is what it is, you know, because it's much more than what it is. It is Evander Kane. And so I don't know. I mean, it worked for Cassian, but he didn't have kind of that track record of the things that the Kane's, you know, had in his pocket and has done. And I just don't know, you guys. I don't know.
Okay, so there's a few things to get through. There's a few things to get through. I'll pick them all. I'll take 3 of them and I'll sort of go one by one. First, the Edmonton Oilers are a very, very fragile team right now between the years. They're a team that is struggling confidence-wise. Their best players aren't able to they're completely impotent, frankly. They're completely lacking in the ability to put pucks in the net. When's the last time Connor McDavid or Draisaitl scored? When's the last time either of them were able to do the kinds of things that found them success earlier in the year? It's just not happening. We want to talk about depth scoring. I'm sorry. The only scoring against Ottawa was depth scoring, right? You can call Cassian not depth scoring because he was playing with McDavid, but I'm sorry, he's still depth scoring.
Sure. The
truth is that across the board, the Edmonton Oilers are failing in every single category. They've been failing to score. They have been failing to keep pucks out of their own net. That is defense and goaltending. The Edmonton Oilers right now are last in the league when it comes to scoring first. It's a weird statistic. They have only scored first 10 times this entire season. They have been scored on first 23 times. That is completely unacceptable from a preparation standpoint, that you are coming out in games and clearly not giving the best effort. Number 2, clearly not a good enough start defensively, clearly not a good enough start goaltending wise. Something is not working that you need to figure out because you are trailing. The Edmonton Oilers have only won games that they are leading or tied coming out of the first period. If they are losing coming out of the first period, they are 0-12 on the year. That is unacceptable as a hockey team. That you are that fragile right now. Number 2, let's go through the two big stories of the week. Obviously, the Evander Kane thing for me is just reeks of desperation. It demonstrates so in like such clear relief how broken a team Ken Holland has been able to put together, right? Obviously, if you are at this point of a losing streak, you are starting to get desperate regardless. But if your only solution is to bring in one guy and that guy comes with all of that baggage, boy, are you broken, right? The idea that Ken Holland in the same press conference can justify why he would give this guy an opportunity and at the same time say the answer's in the room is bullshit. It just doesn't, they don't, those two things don't go together. You're suggesting you need outside help and you're willing to sacrifice all of the bad media attention that's going to come with it, all of the potential problems, the toxicity he brings into your room. Also, can we just for a second, can we just take a moment to talk about the outside part of this that is also just unacceptable, and that's the Edmonton sports media right now. There was not a single person with media credentials who was in either of those two press conferences who was asking the real and important questions here about not just the fact that Evander Kane comes with baggage, but what the baggage is, right? This is someone who is, and also, I'm sorry, why are we asking these guys, are you okay with giving people second chances? What the fuck is that? Second chances. Evander Kane has been run out of Winnipeg, Buffalo, and now San Jose. He is on his fourth chance. This is not second chance. This is a guy who has literally, if you want to call Mike Smith injury prone, this guy is controversy prone. That's all he does his entire career. He's 30 years old. This isn't a young player. His entire career, bad, toxic involvements with organizations has followed him. I will leave that there for a second. My last piece is Ken Holland's press conference. These two things do not correlate. No, I will not trade the first overall pick. No, I will not fire the head coach. I believe the answer is in the room. Oh, but we're in win now mode. Those two things aren't, all of those things don't go together. If you are in win now mode, that means nothing is off the table. If you are in win now mode, that means that you are willing to do anything it takes to make this team successful now. And that's just not the case. Ken Holland is always talking about down the road, down the road, down the road. He made a joke at one point about being, well, if I trade the first overall pick now, and the next time you talk to me, you're going to be saying, where did our depth go? And it's like, guys, you're either all in right now or you're not. And you can't tell me you're all in, because I just don't have any evidence to show me that this team is all in. If they're all in, they're literally, there are two players in this hockey team who are off limits, and it's Connor McDavid and Draisaitl. Everybody else is on the table, but they're not there. They're just not there. And they're not willing to trade everything. They're not willing to sell the farm. And it just tells me that this year's, as far as I'm concerned, already a bust. They're not going to fight for what it takes to win. If that's the attitude and the motivation is literally saying, sorry, guys, you got to do the best you can. And the second part of that is, this is on Ken Holland. I believe, and I have said this for weeks, that I do not believe Dave Tippett still has that room. I think Dave Tippett's a good coach. I think Dave Tippett has had a few examples of bad decision-making. I don't think that he has been given a fair chance to succeed with the team in front of him. That's on Ken Holland. Do I think he should still be the coach? No, he probably should be fired, but unfortunately he's the victim of other people's mistakes, as far as I'm concerned. I'll turn it back to you guys. Sorry.
I worry too. I worry a lot about any kind of substantive changes from a management or coaching standpoint for the Oilers. We've had too much of that for too many years in this city, and particularly with the superstars that we've had. And before as well too. I don't know what's going on in the room. It's impossible. I think it's generally impossible to tell whether a coach has lost a room or not until afterwards, when someone else comes in and you really see a difference, like maybe you've seen in Vancouver. But I think throwing in the towel this year would be a coaching change. This is the last year of Tippett's deal. Let him run it out. Maybe he can make some hay out of nothing here and get this team into the playoffs, because that's ultimately the goal, and that also ultimately needs to be what they.
Have you seen any evidence that he's able to do that right now with the roster he has in front of him? Like, it isn't about coaching.
Yes. No, I do. I have seen it.
Where?
Did you watch the first period? Did you watch the first period of the last game?
Yeah, I watched the whole game.
That was offensively dominant. That needs to continue. And
offensively dominant. They left the period tied, Braden.
They were in the offensive zone the entire
not capitalizing.
First period.
Not capitalizing.
But let's not
passing pucks that they should be
shooting. They're not putting goals.
But you
turning pucks over.
But you have to look at this. This is the problem. What happens in Edmonton, Jordan, is that we get solely focused on one game or one period or one area. In the Tippett era, he's had 4 years as a coach. 2 of them I would count as playoff years. 2 of them.
I don't think he said 4. I think he said 3.
Well, maybe he's on a 4-year deal, isn't he? This is the last year of a 4-year deal.
Maybe you're right.
So the last two years have been playoff years. Whether you count the debacle with Chicago and COVID is one or not.
Yeah. And they were a good team.
And you've seen 4 years of, this is the first year in which you've seen any sort of regression under Tippett. And largely, this is not based on Tippett. It's been based on the resources that he's been.
And I just said that. I do agree with that. I think he is a victim.
I know, but I don't think the change of that. I disagree with the notion that this is the year to trade the first overall pick as the team sits right now. If it was December 1st, I'd be with you 100%. Yes, we're in go now mode if we continue. But if you trade the first overall pick and it ends up being a lottery pick because the Oilers don't make the playoffs, that's a colossal mistake.
What if it was for a player like a Jacob Chychrun, who is a quality defenseman and term and at a cheap deal?
But they played this game on 32 Thoughts, the podcast, and it was, who is that? Is Chychrun enough to get them into the playoffs? I don't think so. He's not Scott Niedermayer and the Dallas Stars. He's not Chris Pronger in 2006. Like, this is he's a solid 1-2. He's a solid 1-3 defenseman. He's on a great contract. This is not a comment about Chychrun himself, but I think the notion right now that, well, we got to trade the first overall pick. One, for what? There's nothing. All it is just sharks circling right now because they are in chaos mode. You're not dealing from a position of strength. And two, it's a colossal mistake if the team doesn't make the playoffs this year. Even if you do get someone that in the long term maybe supports the team, there's just not that player out there. And that type of player demands cap space that the Oilers just simply do not have. So he's handcuffed in a number of different ways, some from the previous administration, some from his own. I mean, Kostin continues to be not his problem that he's had to deal with. And it's really damaged him for the last 3 or 4 years that he's been the general manager. But I think right now, at least publicly, to say that the first overall pick is not on the table, whether that's the truth or not, is the exact right thing to do, because it's just shark circling. And right now, that's a lottery pick. And I as a fan, as someone who wants to see beyond this year's success, could not justify that. I don't think that's justifiable.
When was the last time we traded a first?
Not in a long time, but when have we been in a position to be in a position where we're not looking at trying to make the playoffs, but actually making a run? Well, this is it's happened again where, the bottom's fallen out. And I struggle with the notion. And I know at the beginning of this year, you guys were both at my throat on like, it's win now, everything on the table. And I bought into that. And then December 1st, again, if you ask me, I would have agreed with you, but right now is not the time to be shopping the number one pick. Let's give it a couple of weeks. I don't think they're as bad as the last 6 weeks. They're certainly not as good as the start of the season demonstrated, nor are they as bad as the last 6 weeks. They're somewhere in the middle. Let's get to that mean in terms of whether they're a wild card team or whatever. And then you make a decision at the deadline. But talking about it in January, while you're in the teams in the middle of a slide, the number one picks on the table, absolutely not. That's not the time to be talking about it.
The other thing that we're really struggling here with is the derailment of the season, like just smashed with COVID and then smashed with postponements. And now we're about to go into an Olympic break and an all-star break, and they've played one game in the last 2 weeks. This can't be easy.
There's tons of stuff going on. There's tons of stuff going on. And I think, what the statement's been is let's see what happens over the next 3 to 4 weeks. The COVID's now run through the team. They won't have to test for another 3 months or something like that. Some craziness. So they'll be able to play as a full team. Let's see what the full roster, fully enabled, although now Mike Smith's out another 1 to 2 weeks shed. Let's see where that team lands, because that's a team that looks a lot more like the start of the season roster than the last 6 weeks, where they've been plagued with injuries. The entire left side of the defense was completely gutted. There's been tons of issues here. I think we all, fan bases, teams, media, this podcast included, we all have to pump the brakes here. It's been a messy 6 weeks on a bunch of different fronts. And I think what's the issue with Edmonton always is fire the coach, fire the GM, pick up Evander Kane, fix it now. Let's wait. Like that's the strength of having someone like Ken Holland is that he can weather the storm. And I hope he weathers the storm and doesn't do anything stupid.
And do you think Evander Kane will happen?
Yes, I would bet on yes. I think that the deal's done and in place. The only issue I have with making a prediction too solidly is that now everyone knows the number. So now teams are going to come to Evander Kane with 1.75 and no deal signed. So, who knows what's going to happen there. And two, we don't know what kind of suspension is going to come out of this investigation about him crossing the border potentially with COVID. So,
which could be long-term.
And that also has an impact as well too.
But he cannot be suspended if he does not have an NHL contract. I just want to say that.
Which means they're waiting to find out about it, or
correct.
The NHL
meaning that until he signs a
contract.
contract, the NHL is in no legal position to suspend him.
But I don't want to get it. But there's a bunch of semantics here because he's also grieved the ending of his other contract with San Jose. So
which also means
where that contract sits.
Which also means that at the end of this season, he could be given back to San Jose. under the
Yes.
same terms of that previous deal.
Yes.
There's a
And
whole lot of
they
shit
reach-
there.
another team.
Which
or
is
they
why
reach
I would
a
also
settlement.
say, I
Right.
want to go back to one thing I did say earlier. I think that Elliot, you're right in part of what you're saying, but I think you're talking out of both sides of your mouth when you say you don't want Ken Holland to do anything, and yet you think this will still happen. This, for me, is still like the most desperate thing Ken Holland can do, because
No,
not
absolutely
only
not, absolutely not.
No, it
Not
is.
more desperate
Here's
than
why.
trading the first overall pick.
No, here's why.
No,
Here's
not more
why.
desperate
Here's
than
why.
that. No
Okay,
way.
but here's why. Connor McDavid was crucified in the media, on Twitter, for how he handled that press conference. By signing Evander Kane, you are shackling him to every single one of the decisions that moves forward, every single result that moves forward. If you sign Evander Kane and your team does not pull out of this, you look like you made a terrible, terrible decision in doing that. If you sign Evander Kane and any of his baggage comes up while he's a member of that organization, you've shackled that to all of those players and all of those decisions. Every one of those players is going to have to be constantly feeling the additional pressure of not only are we losing and therefore we are feeling it. You will watch Zach Cassian or Connor McDavid's press conference following the game last night. Those are incredibly, incredibly tense and uncomfortable players who are dealing with something that is not fun to go through to begin with. You add the additional pressure of having a quote unquote reclamation project attached to you, all the other media attention that's going to come with that, all of the every single word, each one of these players being parsed. It's not a
No,
you are not
significantly
you are not a
overvaluing.
strong enough or a functioning organization as it is right now with how this pressure is getting to these guys to add an additional thing like that. And I think it would be an absolutely terrible thing. The other thing is, from the Evander Kane's perspective, I'm sorry, you want to send him into an organization right now that is strong without him, because if that, like if one of those organizations, like, look, let's just be straight up. There's two organizations that are in this conversation. It's the Edmonton Oilers or the Florida Panthers. Those are the only two teams that are still in this conversation. They're the only two teams. 16 other teams looked into this and passed. That should tell you everything you need to know. But the Florida Panthers right now,
Don't
they're
have
winning.
room for him.
They can make room for him, buddy. No, they can make
But
room
on
for
the
a
fourth line?
$1.5 million.
Yeah, no, he's not going to go to a team. No, because
he
this
doesn't
is
like
the
paying
thing, though.
taxes,
This
he
is
will.
and he doesn't, and there's no, and he's not going to. He's not. That's a funny joke, but he's not going to. He's not going to play. He's not going to play.
Sure.
The first or second line minutes.
But this is what I'm also saying for Evander
contract
Kane.
after this year,
For Evander Kane, the Edmonton Oilers are perfect for you. Yes. If you're Evander Kane, they're perfect for him. But that also puts him in a power position. That means he has no accountability. He knows they need him. That he knows how desperate they are for him.
Maybe he'll play to that level.
I disagree.
Or it means that
because
he feels like he's got more leverage, and that's all I'm saying.
I think you're overvaluing a bunch of the impact of having a player on for half of a season, because that's all they're going to get him for. They're only going to sign him for a year.
No, for sure. They can't afford him.
Probably on one-year deals for the rest of his career because of his behavior up until this point, which actually I think puts the leverage in the favor of the team that signs him, in that he needs to play well enough to justify a contract next year. So no, I would disagree with that. I also disagree with like the notion, the impact of trading away a first round pick, whether it's a lottery pick or
look, I'm not saying he should be trading the first round pick. I am not saying
that. I think you're overvaluing.
But you either win now or you're not. You're either win now or you're not.
So then why are you down on the idea of adding more scoring to our team?
Because I don't believe that you need to compromise the integrity of your organization to do it. But I don't believe that.
Okay. It doesn't happen without Connor and Leon saying this.
Of course.
This will happen.
But we also learned a lot from watching Connor McDavid, which is the fact that Connor McDavid is right now also in desperate win everything now mode. That is where he is at. He doesn't give a shit about all of those things. He almost came off as arrogant in that conversation as Kevin Lowe did when he had the conversation about we have two tiers of fans. These are people, he is right now only on one track. And frankly, I think he's angry and pissed off at everybody else around him because he knows that the team isn't playing well, and he knows it lands on his shoulders, and he knows he lands on
the captain.
And they're not scoring. Neither of those two boys are scoring right now, and that's why I say they're fragile. I believe this team is incredibly fragile.
Well, I wouldn't disagree with that. I think you're totally overvaluing the impact of Evander Kane being a negative force on this. There's outside of,
but Elliot, he hasn't been run out of his organizations.
But let me finish. Outside of a prorated $1.5 million contract, there is no cost to the organization outside of potentially some perceived baggage that comes with Evander Kane as we go.
Perceived?
And no, but in the sense that there might be other issues that emerge on the Oilers because of his behavior, which I don't think is the case because, frankly, like you said, this is not the first, second, third, or fourth chance here. This is he's playing year to year now for the rest of his career. So he needs to do well. There is no cost to the team. And it is the lowest impact. It's not desperation. The team is desperate, but I don't think it's necessarily a desperate move to bring on Evander Kane. And I think anything else you do, from trading for some unknown goaltender to trading away the first overall draft pick to putting big time prospects out on the trading block to quote unquote win now, of all of those options, bringing on Evander Kane for half a year is definitely the lowest risk. The lowest risk.
Okay. Well, I guess time will tell.
Weeks.
I don't know. I just don't see it that way. You're not run out of 3 organizations if you don't have locker room issues, if you don't have all those other things. It's just the truth. You go talk to the guys in Winnipeg. Every single one of those players wanted him gone. Every single one of the guys now in San Jose.
After how long? After how long?
Him out. Multiple years, sure.
Yeah, but like, how soon did that come on? Because I'm sure in a half a year they could figure out how to score. And maybe
I'm just saying. I don't know. It says a lot about your organization that you're in a place where you are that desperate. Again, as I said, 16 other teams did their due diligence. You tell me there's 16 other teams who couldn't use him as a hockey
16.
player?
There weren't 16 teams. His agent said there were 16 teams to drive up his value. There weren't 16.
I'll give you the same reference you gave earlier. That number comes from Elliot Friedman.
I know, but Elliot Friedman said there weren't 16 teams. He said
regardless,
that's what the agents said.
Sure. Regardless, many other teams looked at him. Many other teams passed.
Yeah, I don't.
The Edmonton Oilers are in desperate straits. And if that's the only move they make, they're not going to be any better than they were before, as far as I'm concerned. Because frankly, their top guys aren't scoring right now anyway. What's he going to do? Just come in and score your way out of trouble? It ain't going to happen. You need to get your defense and your goaltender fixed.
What is that? And what is that solution right now to you?
Well, you decide. You want to sell the farm and try to win now or not? Because as far as Elliot's concerned, he'd rather wait and try to.
Who are you getting? Who are you getting? Like, there's no one to get.
I'm not saying. Okay, well, I can give you a few different trade options I'd be doing right now. The first goaltender I'd be targeting is Alex Georgiev out of New York. That's the first guy I'd be going for. First, I'd be selling Koskinen to Buffalo, who does not currently have an NHL goaltender. Koskinen's better than a not NHL goaltender, so I'd be moving that salary contract to do that. Then I'd be going to New York and saying, who do you want? You want Philip Broberg or Kyler Yamamoto? I will take a genuine starting goaltender moving forward in Alex Georgiev, which he is statistically much better than any goaltender we've had in the last 4 or 5 years. A potential for that young goaltender to grow with your core. I'd be trading either one of those 2 pieces and whatever second or third round pick New York needs as a sweetener to make that happen.
That's a first. That's the first.
Sure. Well, there's your first then. Is a first right now and a chance to move into a playoffs with an actual opportunity to have some pucks stop before they get into your net. Not worth that. You are last in the league of being scored on first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's.
You know what I'm saying, Elliot?
Yeah.
Like, I'm just saying, at some point you have to decide.
First of all, I don't know if New York's doing that move. I don't know if New York's doing that move. I don't think you're moving. I don't think you're just giving Koskinen to Buffalo. There's lots of issues there. I think that's an assumed thing. Like, those are all ideal situations. If that can happen, sure, great. But I just I don't think it's that simple. I know it's
no, and I agree with you. And goaltenders are very rarely moved during the year. I've said that many times. You are shackled to the guys.
I don't know. We've got a lot. Scrivens, Rolison.
Well, and you've got but see. Okay, so that's fair. Well, I don't know about Ben Scrivens. Dwayne Rollison's a good example, right? But remember that where the team Dwayne Rollison came out of at the time, Minnesota, he was the backup for that organization. So you have to be looking at a guy who is going to overachieve from where he currently was. Alex Georgiev is in a tandem and playing very, very well, right? He's looking for an opportunity to be the number one guy in Edmonton. Obviously, he would be. Instantly, he would be. And that would be, I still think that's, it's either that or what Darcy Kemper. And right now, what's his injury status, right?
Marc-Andre Fleury, man, my bud, Marc-Andre Fleury.
So, but how do you make the money work?
Chris Drieger.
Way too expensive.
Seattle.
You don't.
No, and I don't think Seattle wants to move on from Chris Drieger. They remember that, Braden, they signed him before they drafted him.
Yeah.
They'd already signed it at a long-term deal.
And I think Seattle's already figuring out that they need to switch things up here.
I don't know. That team's probably, we'll see. Anyway, I guess, look, we're not going to solve it today. We can have more conversations about what happens, but I think everything's going to.
Come on, let's try. Because our next game is 4 days from now? 2 weeks from now?
Yeah, it is. All right.
They play the Panthers on Thursday.
Yeah, that should go well. It'll be a good opportunity for Evander Kane to see which direction he wants to go in.
Yeah.
Well, if Florida's playing the way they are, it's going to be a 10-0 blowout.
There's no way Florida couldn't afford him at $1.5 million, Braden.
It's not that. He's not going to play in the top two lines.
It's just
that's what he wants. Yes,
maybe if that's what he wants. Does he want to win a Stanley Cup?
No, he wants to play in the top two lines so he gets a contract.
I don't know.
That's what he wants.
I think he wants to win a Stanley Cup and not pay taxes.
$26 million of debt that he needs to climb out of.
So he doesn't have to pay taxes if he plays in Florida. He gets all of that money, 1.5 million.
Which is why they're going to. No, the Oilers
doesn't have to pay taxes, and I'm just saying. No. We'll leave it there. All right, let's round out here with a little bit. Just a little bit of fun. It's a wild card week in the NFL. We haven't spent a lot of time just talking about football. Our most recent NFL conversation was all about off-field shenanigans and behavior. So busy weekend. Obviously, wild card weekend always is the most fun-packed playoff weekend of them all, and you got a lot of potential upsets and a lot of great storylines. Let's just run down through them really quick, and then you guys can pick off the storylines you most want to talk about. And I know where Braden wants to start. So, Bengals Raiders. Bengals coming out on top after breaking a 31-year playoff victory streak. That is 26-19 for the Bengals. Braden, you weren't alive the last time they won a playoff game. Elliot and I were both 1 year old. Fantastic to see the Bengals out there. Unfortunately for the Raiders, I think they now have the second or third longest streak. The Lions, the Detroit Lions, have the longest losing streak, but the Raiders now fall to the Bengals. That was definitely whichever team wins, it was going to mean a lot for their fans. And then we had the Eagles yesterday, Saturday, we had the other big sort of David and Goliath storyline, the revenge game for the Buffalo Bills, who, they have just been hammered for a decade by the Patriots, and especially when Brady was there. Obviously, they get revenge in snowy Buffalo. They win 47-17 to the Pats, beating the Pats, I should say. And then Sunday, we had three big games. Obviously, time recording this Sunday night. We don't know the outcome of the Cardinals-Rams game, which is going to happen Monday. But the other three games: Eagles-Bucks, the Buccaneers winning 31-15. Big rivalry games following that. The Cowboys and 49ers, these two organizations hate each other. Long history. 23-17 for the 49ers. It looked like Dak Prescott might have a moment for a Hail Mary there at the end. I don't know if you saw that, but he ran to get a little bit extra yardage, and then wasn't able to get the ball into the umpire's hands fast enough to get the ball down for the snap. So the clock ran out on him.
Wasn't able to get onto the line before.
Yeah, but he should have grabbed that ball, found that umpire, and put it in his hands, because all he had to do was touch it, and then the center could have taken it. Instead, they got it down. And anyway, point being, it'll be one that I'm sure Cowboy fans will be sour about for a while, because Cowboys fans traditionally are sour. And then finally, somebody beats Ben Roethlisberger's Steelers to knock Ben Roethlisberger and the Steelers out, ending Ben Roethlisberger's career, and Patrick Mahomes leading the Kansas City team to a 42-21 victory there. So the first 4-5 games of that wildcard weekend are finished. As I said, Cards, Rams, Monday. Where do you want to start, guys? What game was the most exciting for you, or where do you what storyline really jumped out for you, Braden? I know it's the Bengals, but
I'm pretty stoked about these Bengals. Joe Burrow threw for a lot of yards, 117, I think. Lots. They just look really good. 244 yards, so even more than what I thought. 116 receiving yards for Jamar Chase. This tandem, this LSU tandem, they're just really fun. And it's for me, I don't watch a lot of NFL, so it's fun to watch these teams that you don't usually get to see in the playoffs actually making something happen.
Elliot, where do you want to jump in there? Did you watch all these games?
No, I didn't watch all these games. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are up 31-0 heading into the fourth quarter against the Eagles.
Looked really bad today.
The Eagles, come on, just give us a show. I know it's 14-4 versus a 9-9 team. You can't. But I mean, everyone just wants Tom Brady to lose, and everyone goes in, and it's just maybe this is the time. And then it's, it's pretty pedestrian, 29 for 37, 271 yards, 2 TDs, and they win the game 31-15. And they're just so good. This is Tampa Bay's good, man. it's like I would not bet against them to repeat this year, and that is
No.
not where I would have been throughout the start of the season. Like
That's fair. That's definitely fair.
They just Tom Brady and that team, which is stacked.
Yeah,
It's stacked. It's amazing when you don't pay taxes how well you can build a team. So well that you can't play like a great top 6 player in your top 6. They continue to be dominant. Is to me just.
Are they going to win without Antonio Brown?
I don't think. I don't think that'll be an issue. No.
Okay. Well, hopefully that's the same with Evander Kane.
So I agree with you, Elliot. Everyone loves to see Tom Brady lose, which doesn't happen very often, obviously. But you know who else people really love to root against is the Pats. And I got to tell you, man, these Bills are a really good football team. And this Josh Allen kid is a really good quarterback. And it's a great story because a lot of people wrote him off and a lot of people have undersold him. And it's funny. I don't know if you know this, if you guys saw this statistic here coming out of this. The Buffalo Bills are the very first team in NFL history to win a playoff game without punting, kicking a field goal, or turning the ball over.
Whoa.
47-17. They routed the Bill Belichick's Pats. Bill Belichick's teams are notoriously stingy on defense. They've obviously had the greatest quarterback of all time for a long time when they had Brady, and that was, where the storyline was. But those teams were also always incredibly hard to play against defensively. The Bills made them look like a scout team. Like they cut them up. And
did you
Josh
see how
Allen,
cold it was too?
Yeah, but it's cold in Boston. The Pats have played a lot of cold games.
It's incredible.
I thought you were saying that was
many points.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, exactly. And Josh Allen just made it look easy.
TD throws. He threw 5 touchdowns
and 66 yards rushing for the quarterback. Yeah. That's more than the Pats rushed with their running backs.
Yeah. No, totally. That's the thing, right? Is it's like you just. They're for real for sure. Obviously, the 2 other games today, I mean, Kansas City felt like a pretty much foregone conclusion. I think everyone knows that this team has been, they're good, and when they're on their game, they're really good. They get a chance. So
speaking of the Chiefs and Bills next week, that's going to be a game to watch.
Yeah, that's the exciting game next week for sure.
Cardinals and Rams tomorrow. If you hear this tonight or you hear this Monday morning, I might make some time to watch that game. The Cardinals and Rams are very interesting teams for very different reasons, and have both had sort of up and down years. But when they've been up and really up, and if both teams are flying, this might be a game you bet the over on. I'm just saying.
Yeah, and the winner of that game obviously goes on to play on the Buccaneers. So that's that either one of those teams could have a tough time with the next opponent, but it'll be fun to see which one gets through. Sorry, Braden, what did you say there?
I think JJ Watt's back, and I think
they made room today for him on the roster.
Coming back. So. Yeah, that was a big loss for Arizona later in the season there.
Let's just do a little.
Should we all pick a team to win the Super Bowl?
Well, I wasn't going to get there yet. Let's start with next weekend. Though. Let's go divisional. Let's just go divisional round, and then we can go week by week.
Okay.
So here's the matchups we know. We'll start with those 3, and then we can make a pick based on the maybe here, which makes it like a double pick. So you got the Cincinnati Bengals and the Tennessee Titans, obviously, who got the bye. So you got the big running game of Tennessee, and then obviously Joe Burrow and as Braden said, they looked really, really good there against the Raiders, but they're still a young team coming into their own. Elliot, who you have, the Bengals or the Titans?
Oh, I've got the Titans, no question. I'm going to write these down so we can go over this next week, everyone.
Okay. Elliot is our scribe. Is that a word? Scribe? Sounds like the middle ages. Braden can be our who's the guy who used to like run around playing the lute?
The jester.
Yeah, you can be him. Okay. Elliot's the scribe and you're the jester. All right. 49. Oh, sorry. So Elliot took the Titans. Braden?
Well, in jester fashion, I'll take the joke of the Bengals, but only because I know the Titans are going to be a very scary team. But I think that the Bengals have it in them to pull an upset next weekend.
I'll go.
They just have to stop Henry. They have to stop Henry. I don't know how.
Well, and he's
exactly
been
do
hurt,
that.
right? So he's been hurt. So
Yeah,
you know he hasn't.
but it's Henry.
I
He
know,
can
but he hasn't
run with
hasn't
like
been
8
healthy all
guys on
year.
his back and not fall
Jordan,
down.
just take the Bengals and give me the W.
No.
Do it. Watch the upset.
Yeah, all right. I'll take the Bengals. Sure, why not?
Jamar Chase for 200 yards, 300
All right.
yards.
We got the 49ers who squeaked by the Cowboys and Aaron Rodgers, Green Bay Packers. Braden, you want to go first on this one? Who you got?
Yeah, the 49ers. Fuck Aaron Rodgers.
Nice. Elliot?
Aaron Rodgers and the Packers take this game, no problem.
All right. And I will go. You know what?
No, man.
Just take the 49ers. Just take the 49ers.
I'm telling you,
and give me the
it'll be
W.
another upset. People,
But I can't just do the same as Braden the whole way. All right, I'll go with the 49ers. Screw it.
Yeah, all right.
You're gonna be surprised.
2-0 already, buddy.
No way, man. You're gonna be so
right,
disappointed.
Let's go. Let's go. Bills, Chiefs.
You're up first to guess. You're up first to guess this time.
I'm taking
Me?
Buffalo.
Yeah, you're up first.
Oh,
Jordan's up
All right.
first.
Oh, I was going to take Buffalo, so I'll take
Yeah.
Buffalo. Braden and I are just going to be in
Wise.
this together. I actually genuinely think that Josh Allen's in a position this year where if he plays like he played against those Pats, they could push this team to the Super Bowl. I'm not kidding you. I think the Buffalo Bills
Yeah.
are really, really good. And
Well,
I think that, they may be the 3 seed, but they are a genuinely good football team offensively and defensively. But Josh Allen has something special going right now. And if they can come at the Chiefs, they just took down, one of the great coaching master, classes of all time in Bill
with
Belichick, and they made it look easy.
sort of team.
And now they just have to go up against a really, really good offense. And if they can hold against that, I mean, it could be a really high scoring game if both these quarterbacks go off like they did in the first round. So I'll go with the Bills for sure. Braden, you picked the
Braden?
Bills too. So then
Well,
Elliot, guess,
I
is
also
taking the Chiefs.
genuinely believe that the Bills will win. But like you said, I think it's been a lot of fun to see the comparisons here between Josh Allen and Mahomes' play style. Lots of running going on, lots of scramble.
I mean, I'll go 3-0 in picks and take the Chiefs. And the last one.
So this is the tricky one because we don't know yet who's in there. Will it be the Cardinals, the Rams, or the Bucs? If it's how do you do this? I guess so. You want to take the Buccaneers or the other,
or the other. I think that's the only.
But that's so hard because if it's the Cards, I'm not taking them. But if it's the Rams, I think the Rams can beat the Buccaneers. I think the Rams are the only team with the defense capable of really shutting down Tom Brady and being difficult for Tom Brady. Because what is Tom Brady's biggest weakness right now? It's being flushed out of the pocket.
Doesn't have Antonio Brown. Oh,
well, but he needs time. He is not a mobile quarterback, and he's even more not a mobile quarterback than he was when he was young. When the guy was healthy and young, he was not mobile. But I'm sorry, like that Rams defense is still scary. I'm gonna, you know what?
darn! I gotta go with Brady and the Bucks because he is the all-time GOAT of all time. Is that what you were gonna say, Jordan? Because that's what I was gonna say.
No, I really want to take the other. Yeah,
We'll
you
give
take the
Cards.
Bucks. I'll go with the Cards Rams.
Okay,
I picked all the underdogs. I've picked every underdog.
I do.
Yeah, and I've taken every favorite because I'm taking the Bucks. It doesn't matter who they play; they're going to beat both teams. So,
All right,
Monday's the feel-good game for those two teams because they're going to lose to Tom Brady next week.
the Rams though have the best receiver in the league.
All right.
They've got the best linebacker in the league.
They had
They're a good.
they had a
football team.
really, really bad end of their season.
Great jerseys. Great jerseys.
Great
Bengals and Titans. I've got Titans. You boys have Bengals. 49ers and Packers. I got Packers. You guys got 49ers. Bills and Chiefs. I got Chiefs. You guys got Bills. Bucks versus the Cards/Rams. I've got the Bucks. Braden's got the Bucks, and Jordan's got the Cards/Rams. We'll see you next week.
All right, that was fun. And so was this week's show. Thank you both, as always, for bringing it all. And thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll be back next week with another great show. That was Hattrick. Hattrick is a member of the Ordinary Podcasting Network. It's produced every week by Jordan Dowler Coltman and Braden Dowler Coltman.
and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for listening.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network wishes to acknowledge that the lands on which our conversations take place include Treaty 6 territory, the traditional meeting ground and home for many Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, and the Nakota Sioux peoples, as well as the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. And we extend our appreciation for the opportunity to live, create, and share stories on these territories.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network intends to engage in conversations and dialogue which acknowledge that reconciliation is not a destination, but a journey, and that we remain committed to practicing our craft in a decolonized space.